Hello, and welcome to episode 8 of the Improving Always podcast. In this episode, we're going to talk about youth development in general, and then specifically, all over the world. We're going to touch on the system in the US, since that's what a lot of us have experience with, but also other countries. Dimitri played for an academy in Greece and has played in Spain. I played in Greece. I also played in England. So, we do have a little bit of a perspective from outside the US as well. And we will also touch on a very controversial topic, pay to play, and why it might not be the issue that you think that it is. So I'm going to kick things off just very briefly by touching on very broadly on my philosophy for youth development. Obviously, this is something we've talked about before and something that I know at least one person, Noblet, will agree with. And it is that there are 3 steps, and it's very, very important that these go in order. So you need to start with enjoyment first. From enjoyment comes development. And from development comes success. You can't skip any of these steps. You can't start, right off the bat looking for development or looking for success. You have to start with enjoyment. Make sure the player loves the game. That's what's going to make them work hard. That hard work and that love of the game is what's going to lead to development. And then from there, you can start looking at success as the player gets older and older. Thoughts?
I think that's what I would agree with as well. I mean, let's face it. Why do people play sports or stick to a sport? It's usually the sport that they enjoy. It's not because other reasons. It's not just because that's the sport they feel they're good at. And even if it is because that's the sport they feel they're good at, that's why they enjoy it. And yeah, it has to be fun, and you have to figure out a way to make the sport fun. And then that's where you create the environment to learn skills and then become successful at it when you try to get into the competitive levels.
100%.
Yeah, I'd agree with them all. I don't think that's too controversial at all.
Yeah. I mean, there's always going to be some people, and, I'll always be dealing with some parents who are, wanting their kids to succeed at U8 or U10, even up to 14. I would say you haven't played in a single game that matters at all. As soon as the game's done, you learn your lessons and you move right on to the next training session, the next game. Honestly, it doesn't matter at all. I see these videos of the next Messi, the next Ronaldo, the 8-year-old or something. Okay, you can be very, very good when you're 8 years old. But if you're not developing from that, it's about constantly getting better year after year, season after season, because if you stop improving, it's over. But as I said, it has to start with the enjoyment for sure.
Going from that, But what you said about enjoyment, I think obviously you don't have to start young, right? Some people discover the love for the sport later on. It kind of depends on the person and whatever. But I think youth development, especially in the earlier ages, I think is very important, right? I had a theory I was thinking about last week or something, where I was saying if you just get in a good academy team, let's say MLS team here, and you just train for them, right? You just train with them because you enjoy the game. You don't really spend that much time outside individually training. I think if you just train with a team for, let's say, 5 to 10 years, however long you're playing with them, I think just from that, you would already be considered a well above average player just because of the environment you're in. So yeah, I just want your thoughts on that.
Yeah, I would go one step further and say that if you play 2v2, 3v3, 5v5 or something every day in the park with a couple other players who, like the game, you can't be playing against, I couldn't be playing
Noblet, who's horrible.
with you three, because obviously, you know, I'm just like so much better. It wouldn't even be worth it. But as long as you're playing consistently with players who are around your skill level, like preferably a little bit better than you, or maybe a little bit older than you, right? So when, you know, Dimitri and I would play a lot with my friends, because Dimitri was, you know, good for his age, or maybe he was good for his age because he spent so much time playing with me and my friends, right?
Most likely, yeah.
So, but like if you just do that consistently, that's the most important thing. From the ages of, you know, 3 or 4, when you're just starting to kick a ball, to like 9 or something, it should be so much about small-sided games. And I've had people, I worked with a coach in a Premier League academy, and we had a conversation about how at some academies they put the best coaches with the very, very young players. Now, I'm not saying that's like, I'm not sure where I fall on that exactly, but like a good coach doesn't mean you're always like incredibly involved in telling the players what to do. A lot of the time I see the issue with players from 3 to about 9 is over coaching. So stepping in too much, saying too much. And I want those players to be able to figure things out for themselves and problem solve for themselves, because you can't be making the decisions for these players. You know, obviously we'll do technical things. We'll work on skills. We'll work on, you know, dribbling. We'll work on passing. But I'm not going to make the decisions for these players. We talked about decision-making last week. It's not going to work. You need to learn how to make decisions. And if you make bad decisions, you'll learn from that too. But you know, so you can put the best coaches with the youngest players. But the best coaches, that doesn't mean that they're going to be, you know, super active in the way that you think a coach should be active with that age group. But yeah, I think that if you just play consistently with good players, you know, you'll get better. You don't even need to be on a team necessarily.
I mean,
That's kind of weird because, sorry, do you want to go Noblet?
Sure. I think there's just a reality
Shut down.
With a skill sport.
Destroyed.
A skill sport like soccer, there is, the more often you can be with the ball at your feet, the better you're going to be at the sport regardless. I would even take what Christo was saying a step further, is like, let's say you only get to play against people 2 times a week, but you go outside and you practice juggling every single day from the time you're 5 years old to the time you're in high school. You're probably going to be technically superior than 90% of your competition, if not more. And this applies to a concept that, while it's not perfect, it does make sense. I'm sure you've heard of the 10,000 hours rule. So the idea being, to have skill mastery in something, you need 10,000 hours of practice. Now, I'm not going to do the math in my head because I just don't want to. But if you go outside and you practice for 1 to 2 hours a day for
3 hours a day for 10 years, that's what it is.
Something like that.
Yeah.
You're going to get that before you become an adult if you start at a young age. And that will give you a lot of heads up over your competition. And to the point that Christo was making about the younger players and the best coaches, what I would say is, it depends what you mean by best coach. Do you mean the best tactician or all that? Then sure. No. If you mean the guy who can teach people how to dribble, pass, and receive, and is just super technical and super precise, yes. And that's who I actually would like with the youngest players, because that's what I would like. And as far as overcoaching, I agree, because like at these young ages, kids need to be developing the basic fundamentals, but they also need to not be taught to become robots either. And this is just an anecdote I've had. I'm not sure if any of you have had this position, but like when teaching little kids dribbling moves, I actually don't like to teach them set moves as much outside the basics. And one of my pet peeves was teaching the scissors versus the step over to little kids. And the reason is with little kids,
don't do it this way, do it this way.
Well, I've never got them to do these scissors in the correct direction. They always do it in the wrong direction, whichever one you say. For some
They'll
reason,
do the
brain,
opposite.
Yeah. And
maybe because you're facing them, and then like if they're looking at you, they see like the mirror image, right? I don't know,
but
that's probably why.
But the issue is like I've had a kid who was a great basic dribbler and just had really good basic cuts and control. Whenever we put him in a scrimmage, he just diced through the other team. But whenever we were doing practice, the coach who was leading the session was like teaching the scissors and the step over. And he struggled more than any other player on the pitch at doing it the correct direction whenever they called scissors or step over. And like the other coach with me was like, I'm like, leave him alone. Let him just be confused in this. He's already better than everyone else here at dribbling. Let's just try not to confuse him. And it's like, and I'm someone who defends step overs and scissors and moves like that because creativity is fun. They do work if you do them correctly. But like, if a kid isn't feeling it naturally, there's no reason to force it. You don't have to force your own moves on other people. They'll develop that when they're a teenager and they actually can do it on their own and develop their own style.
Yeah, I say like people like ask me questions like there's this guy called SK Training who asked me if
sounds like a loser.
Something about like do you think someone could become like as good a dribbler as Messi? Obviously I'm just joking, but like it's like a theoretical conversation. But I do have athletes ask me like, oh, can I dribble like Messi? Can I shoot like Ronaldo? And I'm always like, why? Figure out what works for you. When I'm teaching an athlete to shoot a ball, I rarely break down the technique. I find that helps way more often than it hurts. I have that player take a lot of shots and they will figure out what works best for them. If you're practicing 1v1s, I have that player take a lot of 1v1s. I don't teach them 1,000 tricks. I just make them take on defenders a lot. They'll find out what works for them. Every single player is going to have a slightly different style for almost everything, for passing, for shooting, for dribbling. And you don't want to create robots, right? You want to let players express themselves and they'll find out what works for them. If I try to break down the technique of shooting, I might make a player shoot in a way that doesn't work for them. But if I just have that player take 100 shots, 200 shots, 300 shots, they're going to get better at shooting and they'll figure out what works for them, right? Technique, I really do think like it should feel natural and good, and it's going to feel natural and good in a little bit of a different way to every player. If a player can dribble really well without using any skills or tricks, great. If they use a ton of skills and tricks, great. If they shoot, with if they're playing balls like Beckham, always with putting a little spin on it, or not always, but a lot of the time, great. If they're hitting strikes like Thiago the other day against Porto, where there's like just like the cleanest strike I've ever seen, great. Wild. But you figure out what works for you, right? It's not about making every player do the same things or do the like it by the book or perfectly or whatever that means. I think that's unproductive.
Yeah, it's just about putting them in situations,
Yeah,
that they'll find themselves in, and they'll figure it out.
Yeah, and they'll figure it out. Obviously, you need to put them in those situations over and over and over and over and over again, right? And you need to make the situations more and more difficult as they get better. That's really all it is. So yeah, I mean, obviously, this whole conversation started on SK's point, like of if you put a player in a team at a young age, will they improve? Yeah, for sure. But at the same time, you need to figure out what will help that player stick with it, right? Because a lot of players who start young in an academy don't stick with it because they aren't enjoying it, or too much stress, too much pressure. there's some great players who never played on teams until they were like 12 or 13 even, right? Like if they were just playing street soccer or in the park or something, as long like you can play soccer in tons of different situations and have it be at a high level. It just matters who you're playing against, not that you're wearing like, the academy jersey or something.
I think it to me. Oh, yeah. No, I was just going to quickly say it's not necessarily about being in the academy. I think the academy just makes it so much easier because everything's planned out for you. You have your times to train, you have your days, you have your extra gym plans, you have your meal plan or whatever. And it's so much more simple if everyone else just does it for you. Yeah. It's and there's more effort if you have to go out and do it yourself.
Yeah. And the people around you, right? Like they're putting you with other good players. So like they handle it for you. Obviously, if you're not in an academy or not on a team or whatever, you have to figure it out by yourself, which can be tough. But it's definitely still possible.
And to add on to what, sorry, Noblet, you can go first if you want.
Everyone's just cutting SK.
Yeah, I'll step in and cut out SK. We don't want to hear him anyways. But the point about that is, like you mentioned, you don't have to play on an academy. I've even heard people make arguments that it's better not to get into too structured of soccer at too early of an age. Now, I think this should be taken with a grain of salt, because if you're someone growing up in a good environment where kids are playing outside every single day and you can just literally step into a pickup game, yes, it might be better to wait until you're almost a teenager before you really get into genuinely organized soccer, because you go out there, have fun, because that's what you and your friends are always doing every single day. But if you're, for example, you're growing up in like a rural town in the United States to where kids that go out and play soccer aren't exactly on every park, then maybe getting into an organized club at an early age even has its advantages over not doing it, because the alternative is you might not be playing very regularly on a regular basis.
Yeah. SK?
Yeah.
I'm not going to let you talk now.
We're not skipping them now?
Yeah. Going off that point, I was...
To add on to like what everyone said, I think again it all comes back to like enjoyment, right? Even if you're not part of an academy, if you really enjoy the sport, you will find a way. And usually the ones, I've discussed this with Christo, I think in his comment section on something on TikTok, the ones that make it to the big leagues are usually the ones that enjoy the sport the most. So that's why they put in so much time in. Yeah,
for sure. And like I'll say, like I think if you have the opportunity to be in an academy at a young age, I think that will help you in the long term in a couple different ways. But it's important to like not see it as like that's it, and like if I'm not in the academy anymore, it's over, or like if I'm not enjoying the academy anymore, I need to stick with it. Like it's one way to develop. But it's not the only thing that matters. So then now we can start to talk a little bit about as players get older, as they're like 11, 12, 13, 14, 15. And I wanted to touch on one thing before we get into kind of like how like systems work. But like how to pick teams. Now, obviously, I think being in an academy at this age is important. And it's unlikely that you'll get into an academy after 14, 15, probably not going to happen. Academies like to, build their players from when they're, 11 or 12. That's when you're likely to get into an academy. So it's super important if you can to get into an academy. If you're not, doesn't matter. And you can still like pursue academy opportunities, but just know that it's less likely as you get older. But I think that like when you're picking a team, a lot of athletes only look at the level the team is playing at in the other players you'll be playing with. And I do think if you're the best player on your team, it does kind of say, maybe I should be looking to join a better team. But I honestly believe, and obviously I'm biased, but I honestly believe that the most important thing from ages like 11 to 16, when you're picking a team, the most important thing should be coaching. It doesn't mean just like the head coach. All right. It might mean the assistant coach. It might mean other people on the coaching staff. But I do think that like that is always a good thing to base your decision on. If you're going to a team with a good coach, you will improve. And I think that's super important in that age group.
Well, how do you decide if like the team has a good coaching staff and whatnot?
You go on Yelp.
Sure. Focus. Well, I'd look at like a club's philosophy. If they're and history, maybe players that have gone from playing with them to playing at higher levels. Although that's not the only thing that matters. I wouldn't so much look at like results necessarily, because like oftentimes the clubs which have the best results are not the clubs that focus on development. So I'd look, a heavy focus on developing individual players, and just a high standard of coaching, coaches that do coaching work full time. So the club I work for, all the coaches that they coach, that's their work. They don't have, other jobs outside of sports. They coach. That's it. So, I think that's important because, if someone's working a 9 to 5 and then they have like 2-3 hours in the afternoon where they're also doing coaching, not that you can't be a good coach. But if it's your life, then you're probably going to, take more pride in your work, if that makes sense.
Do you also think like teams that aren't succeeding as much could still have a very good coaching staff? Or
at 11 to 16, absolutely. Because, it's like having good players does not mean that means that you're marketing yourself well. You're
usually just
like
the most established club in the area.
Yeah. Like it's not necessary. Like you can, I guess it's tough for players sometimes because when you go for a trial, the coach will always be nice if they want you. But you can tell by the session, are they doing a lot of small-sided games? Is it drills where you're just kind of standing around? Does the coach talk not at all? Do they talk a lot? Or do they talk when they talk? Do the players listen? Like, are they talking like at good times? Are they keeping it short? Are they giving, players ways to improve? Is the session enjoyable? That, all this stuff is important. There's tons. You can be a good coach in a million different ways. But you can tell a good coach from a bad one usually.
Yeah. I mean,
go ahead, Noblet. No, go ahead, Dimitri.
No, I was just going to bring up like even later on, obviously you want to have good results when you're older, but a lot of like the academies here that play in professional, like 3rd or 4th division Spain, they have teams that are playing at these levels and they're not doing amazingly. Like Rayo Majadahonda's B team or Leganés B team, Alcorcón B team, all teams that have a first team in the 2nd or 1st division. They're playing at a high level, which is why they're not doing very well, but they're some of the best players. You know what I mean? So it's definitely just something to think about.
And just to go back on the part about it not always being about the club with the best results and all that stuff, I just wanted to mention probably the person I hate most in youth soccer is the person who judges results of 10, 12-year-olds, 13-year-olds. The reality is to some degree, that's even true once we get into high school age. Now, in high school age, results do start to matter more, but like I've coached high school age boys before, and we've played games where we lost mostly because the other team was better than our team. But I thought my boys played great, and I wanted to keep everything very positive. And the first thing I hear is like, you guys lost 2-0. And it's like, yeah, but that team's undefeated and beating all the other teams 5-6-0. And we played amazing because if you look at, our level, we probably should have been beat 5-6-0, and we managed to hold them to 2-0. But a lot of people put really, really high emphasis on results into an unrealistic standard, and they don't look at player development and keeping the players enjoying themselves. And if you harp on losing all the time, you're going to have more players drop out and not reach their potential or just quit playing altogether.
Yeah, 100%. And like something that, I don't know if this is controversial or not, but like you should be developing the individuals at this age, because, you know, a team of 14-year-olds, they're not going to be playing together when they're, you know, probably even 16 or, you know, 18, 19, like they're going on to play for other teams, right? Hopefully. So you need to make the individuals like improve. The team is kind of secondary. So obviously, you know, you want the players to learn how to function within a team, but not necessarily that team that they're on. You just want to, you know, give them the tools to not be a complete jerk to their teammates, make good decisions on the field, but they should be developing individually because they're going to succeed on a different team. They're not going to, you know, hopefully they're going to go on and play, you know, in college or varsity high school or professional. And they're going to be playing with different players. They need to be able to function within a team, but not necessarily the team they're on right now. So, you know, the player development at that age is more important than team development.
Just a little question that popped into my mind about academies when we were talking about it is, and I want all of your thoughts on this, is would you guys rather play in the college level or academy level after 18? Because I do know some MLS academies do have teams over 18, like U21 or U23. So yeah, if you could choose, like, let's say any college level or an MLS academy or any kind of academy, which one would you rather take?
I'd much rather play in an academy anywhere else. That's it, like everywhere here in Spain, all the top teams have like under 18s, under 21s, under 23s. And I think the levels just are like, you can't compare them, even with all the resources they have in the States and all these schools, all the amazing facilities, blah, blah, blah. The level here is so much higher still.
I think, because I think SK is mentioning with MLS academies in particular, I would still choose the MLS academy, mostly because if you're in the system for an MLS team, it's much easier to get into that first team for that same system than it is to say, well, I'm 18, I'm going off to college now, I'm going to play D1 college soccer, and after I graduate, I'm going to go into the MLS draft. So if, for example, if I was a young kid, and since I'm located in Tennessee, playing for Nashville Soccer Club's Academy, and I could just stay with Nashville Soccer Club's Academy after 18, yeah, that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to play for their U21s, and hopefully I can break into the reserves or the first team eventually, not go off to college and play college soccer, because reality is once you get out of that academy system, it's harder to get back into the MLS system than it was in the beginning.
Yeah. So I agree, but I'm going to play devil's advocate for a second. So I do think like being in the academy system is better because, you know, it's a clearer path to going professional. And I think it's probably a higher level as well. Now, I will say, if you get a free ride to a Division I school, and, you know, you want to have a college degree, which I think is important, and, you know, can be important for later in life, for jobs, and you get a free ride, right? Most professional players will never make the money that degree is worth. So if that degree is worth like $200K, right? Most people who go pro won't make 200K in their whole career. So that could be worth it if you want that degree. But I think if you're all in on playing at the highest level you possibly can, I think staying in an academy is a better option. But I don't think it's like, I think there's a huge difference if the academy is in Europe. If it's an MLS academy, I think there's a big difference, but it's not, but college can still be, plenty of players go from college to playing semi-professional and even professional, even not from the top schools.
Or even Division One. I mean, the only thing I would add to that, though, is that full scholarships are extremely rare, actually, in fact, at least my experience is that full scholarships were almost always reserved for a foreign talent in a lot of schools. They'd bring in some foreign star who'd come in from either Europe or South America, and they would be the best player on the team. And that was the one full scholarship player. And all the American players, sure, some of them got good scholarships, but there were very, very few that were full scholarship players. And don't count yourself out of getting that. I mean, if you're really, really good, you might be able to get that full scholarship, but most of us probably won't.
Yeah. I mean, but even say you get a half off, that's maybe worth $100K. Still probably be more than, any, what is it? 90% of professionals are making $1K a month or less. So $12K a year. That's 10 years worth of making that much money. So it's still it's just something to think about, right? If an education also matters, which I think, education does matter. College degree is worth it. You make a lot more money from almost any job if you have a college degree. That is true. Even if the degree isn't in the field that you have the job in, you make more with a degree. So, it's just something to think about. And I think exploring college opportunities can be worth it. When players are in high school, if they're very good players, I always advise them to contact colleges, have those opportunities, contact academies in the States and abroad, and then also contact, semi-professional and low-level professional teams usually in Europe, but also in, the States and other countries as well. So we'll switch, we'll transition a little bit into talking about the systems at play both in the US and abroad. And specifically a topic that I know Noblet is very passionate about, and I'm sure we all have strong opinions on this. So pay to play, how big of an issue is it? And what are the ways around it? So we'll start with how big of an issue is it? Maybe Noblet wants to take this one since it's his one of his passions.
Okay, so pay to play, and I'm gonna be upfront. I'm not a fan of it. However, why this got brought up and why we decided to talk about it is there's a lot of people who say the USA can never be a good soccer country, and one of their main go-tos is pay to play weeds out too many lower income players. And that's just not true in other countries. Now, yes, other countries have different systems and different ways that they fund their youth soccer, but pay to play isn't 100% unique to America. There is some sort of pay to play pretty much everywhere.
In every country, 100%. Yeah. And there is some form of it. Yeah. Varying degrees, obviously.
Yeah. And the reality is I think the real main reason the United States is not already a world champion soccer country has much more to do with the fact that we have less quality youth coaches, and just a smaller percentage of our top athletic talent is going into soccer. Not that all our good talent is just weeded out. And here's the other aspect, just like there are some either free or cheap avenues into other sports like basketball or American football through school sports, we have school soccer here too. So they have that cheap
and town soccer. Well.
Yeah. And most MLS academies are actually paid for once you make the academy too, which is the same as what it is in most of Europe and elsewhere. In fact, some countries, you still have to pay for the academy. I know that's the case in some South American countries, that there are still academy fees at times. But as far as alternatives to pay to play, I hate to break it to people, but look at Dimitri right here. I mean, this is the mega billionaire capitalist right here with all the Benjamins in the background. Capitalism is a global system. Until there's an alternative to that, somebody is going to have to pay for it. There is no other alternative. It's either going to be the families and players themselves paying, or the government, or the government, or a rich benefactor who wants to step in to pay for it. And
or the winner of the Squid Games,
which was you, right?
Ew, that's why do you think I got all this?
Well, I mean, it's the only reason you're alive, because everyone else got killed off, right? But
exactly. I played it all. There's no competition.
Not the TikTok team. We need to do TikTok soccer content creators Squid Games. And if you lose, you have to delete your account.
But
I shouldn't have said that, because I easily have the most to lose. Dimitri's like, I'll do that.
But the reality is somebody has to pay for the coaches, the facilities, and all that stuff. And what the academies that don't charge their players do is they're attached to big professional teams that have a lot of revenue and money to spend. And you can't just do that for every grassroots program. Those grassroots programs don't have that money. So a lot of them charge player fees. And the alternative actually is government funding.
Yeah.
That's one of the only realistic alternatives that we could do.
Which is not going to happen in the States for not anytime soon. And especially not, I think we'd have to actually have a different economic system that's not capitalism at all for that to even happen. And before we get into a socialism versus capitalism argument, which could actually be this discussion, yeah, that's what it is. I mean, we're going to have some way to fund it. And I think, if my ideal system, we would actually have some sort of public funding for recreational sports, fitness, and exercise. Yeah, but off of that, the primary goal of that wouldn't be to help players go pro. It would be for health and general well-being. That would be the primary goal, right?
Yeah, recreation. Yeah. And it would actually be much more based and not even directed at soccer necessarily. It'd be make sure you have parks. Every American citizen has a gym membership. Yeah. And every town has a state-funded youth soccer program that they can go into. And same goes for youth basketball, baseball, American football, and every other activity that you could think of. But that doesn't exist right now. Yeah. And you'd get called a communist for even suggesting it. So
I do think
what you will.
I do think
comrades.
Access to playing sport should be, in my opinion, a human right. I think everyone should have access to play sports, but that doesn't mean that you it's a human right to have an amazing coach and be in everyone who wants to be can be in an academy or whatever. Right. So, but obviously, if everyone has access to sport, they might, be able to improve by playing more sport, and maybe they'll get there. Right. Or they'll just love the game so much and stick with it. And eventually, if they're good enough, if they work hard enough, it'll be a better opportunity. Now, I'll say this. Does anyone really think that MLS academies are you know what? We're kind of crap, but just screw it. We're not going to look for good players. We're just going to we're going to just look for players who make enough money to play for good club teams. That's where we'll recruit players from. Oh my God. Are you serious? These MLS academies, they're looking at kids at 5 years old, 6 years old. Are these 5 and 6 years old kids? Are they playing for top level club teams yet? No, they might be playing just town. Okay. But if you're good enough, all right, the academy will probably hear about it somehow. If the video of the next Messi happens in like, in Boston, like the New England Revolution are going to be on that pretty quick, right? They'll find that kid and they'll get him on their team, right? Like if you're good enough, the academies will find you, and they're looking for kids at young ages, right? I'm not saying there are scouts at every town game, but if you consistently play well at 7, 8, 9 years old, even if it is just town soccer, like someone's going to hear about it, right? Not even just academies, but like we talked about how if you just play the game a lot and you train a lot individually, you will improve. And the priority, wrongly, of a lot of club coaches is to win games. To win games, you want good players. If you can't afford it, they'll find a way to get you on their team. So be good enough to get on that team and play for free or play at a highly discounted rate. And like, obviously money helps, right? Because it opens the door to more opportunities. You can do individual training with good coaches. You can, you don't have to be that good to play for a good club team. You can, just be good enough to make it. And you need to be better if you have less money. But this is true in almost everything in life, right? Like it's going to be harder if you don't have the money. And it's, it's true in soccer too, but it's also true in most countries. Clubs and academies want good players. They'll find those good players. It's up to you to find a way to improve and become good enough that they'll want you. That really is what it is, and I do believe you can do that by playing a lot individually, finding a good group of friends you can train and play with, and, playing for even just a town or a school team,
And the one thing that I really want to add is what pisses me off the most about this is that a lot of kids in USA or Canada, just in North America, use pay to play as an excuse to not try out for teams and not to go anywhere, right? Because like you guys said, academies will look for best players and give them the options to play for them if they can't afford it financially. And even for clubs lower than academies, they still offer discounts for players if they really want them, for sure.
Yes.
Yeah.
And this is how I got into my team, right? I made the tryout, but the fee was too much, so they lowered it and I got to play there. So about pay to play, I do think it's a big problem, but like Noblet Strength said, people think it's like a spiritual voodoo that USA can't play good because of the pay to play system. And
we're the only capitalist country in the world. Everyone else is communist. Haven't you heard that?
There's like 5 countries that are even just like actually socialist, right?
No, not even anymore. It's Cuba, North Korea, Vietnam. 5.
Yeah,
Cuba, Vietnam, North Korea, Laos, and China. All except they all have capitalist economies now.
Yeah, and it's like everyone else is capitalist, and it's like, it's only the big bad USA.
Our podcast is going to turn into this. My bookshelf. I have. You can't see it. Adam Smith, Karl Marx.
Nice. Communist Manifesto, baby.
Well, that's Grundis. It's a little bit heavier than the manifesto, but yeah.
Yeah, I mean, like people use it as an excuse, but you know what? You just need to try out for a lot of teams, wait here if you make it, and then email the coach and be like, "Look, I can't afford that much. I can pay half, or I can pay a third, or whatever it is." Yeah. Because most people can pay a little bit, and if you can't do that, you know what? You make the best of it. You play for your town team. You play for your school team. You train on your own. You play pickup games. There are pickup games, even in the States. Like find people that you can play with. 1v1, 2v2. And like, if you do that consistently, you will improve because most people aren't, right? Most people aren't putting in the time.
For youth clubs in America are becoming more and more and more common and better. So like, yeah, it's true. Somebody on your team at the club level is paying for a lot of stuff, but there's also scholarships. And also, I've heard the story of the rich kids' parents on the team paying for 3 players more than one time. So this stuff does happen.
Personal experience with that happening.
Yeah,
I'll fund them all.
Yeah, and the thing is like, unless you guys want to start a vanguard party and overthrow capitalism to get rid of pay-to-play soccer, we're not going to do that. And we have to work within the system as it is right now. And that system still allows a lot more avenues to play soccer. I mean, the reality is you have a much better chance of becoming a professional soccer player growing up here in America with our pay-to-play system than you do in probably the majority of countries in the world. And the reason is if you're living in a very, very poor country, playing sports is probably not your priority. Even from a young age, your parents are probably going to know you need to contribute to some sort of family income so we can eat and have a place to live in. And yeah, you're not going to get the opportunity to play sports in even poorer countries. In the United States, as flawed as it is, not just outside of soccer, most people have the opportunity to at least play sports in their youth. And that gives them just an enormous advantage over the majority of the world. And the only countries that maybe have this better are really Western Europe. I would even say South America, it's not better. It's really just Western Europe.
Yeah, because I'm not sure if you said it, but I'll like caveat that with like, if you're into soccer, right? Because like the chances of you being into soccer, if you're born in the States, are pretty low compared to every other country in the world, because soccer isn't the number one sport, although I think it will be at some point. But like, right, like there's a ton of different sports to choose from. Whereas like if you grow up in another country, obviously there are other sports, but it's like everyone plays soccer and like less people play the other sports. So like, like if you're into soccer, the States, it's not a bad place to be if you want to play at a high level, in this sport. And I honestly believe that it's getting better and better. We're getting better coaches. Youth systems are getting, better. The national team is getting better. The MLS is getting better. The leagues underneath the MLS are getting better. It's getting there, but it takes time, right? And I think like soccer is growing in popularity steadily, but it's not quite there yet. So of course, it's going to be a little bit behind what it would be if it was more popular.
Yeah, and popularity really is the main issue in American soccer. I mean, I've used the stats a lot, but like only 7% of Americans even consider soccer to be their favorite sport. Mm-hmm. Where like, let's use Brazil as an example. My guess 90. Is that number. Yeah, it's probably at least over 50%, if not closer to 80, 90%. Because I mean, the big sports in Brazil are soccer, then volleyball, then you get into
probably like soccer, beach soccer, and then like futsal. It's like probably like the top 3, like you consider different sports
futsal, street soccer. But here's the thing. I would actually argue that if you like soccer and you're serious about soccer, you probably have as much or better chance of going pro growing up here in America as you do in Brazil.
Yeah, I agree with that. It's just that they're less likely to be into soccer, right?
Yeah. But for one, like in Brazil, you just have worlds of competition because everyone's playing soccer. But the other thing is like, there's not all that much money to go around in Brazil, actually. Like a lot of the clubs are broke in Brazil. Like it's not actually like super rich or super well-funded to where in America, there's money everywhere. I mean, you as an individual might not have it, but somebody has money funding these clubs and providing facilities. Like a lot of our really nice, especially like the turf laid fields and all that stuff, like that would be the dream of a kid in Brazil growing up, to be able to play on a field like that. And little white American kids get to play on that every single week, and they don't even comprehend the privilege they have to be able to do that. And that's the reality is, as soccer grows in popularity, we have all these resources that like we're eventually going to have some of the best youth players coming up in the entire world. And there's just nothing other countries can do about that, because we're going to win.
All right. What's the prediction on the year the US, let's say, wins the World Cup? What's the prediction?
Next one, of course.
So 2026 is in the US. I'll say around, is it going to be 32 teams?
It's going to be 48.
So what is that? How many teams go through?
I don't know, but at least from what I've read, it actually...
Wait, so will it be like 48 teams, 32 go through, and then we have a round of 32?
No, I don't know exactly how it works, but at least what I've heard is most people think the 48 team system will actually cause more Cinderella stories and stuff like that. So it's actually more likely for a mid-level team to make a big run in it than in the current 32 team system. Now, to the picking the year, I always hate to pick the year because here's the thing. For example, the next World Cup, I've said that Brazil and France should be the favorites. If I just say France is going to win or Brazil's going to win, I'm probably going to be wrong. But I think in the next couple decades, the United States will be a country that could be favorites to win the World Cup.
So there will be one in 2050, right? I'll say 2050.
Yeah. That sounds like a good bet. I mean...
Over, under 2050. All right, that's what we have to do. Over, under 2050.
I'd say over.
Over.
Yeah, I'm going to go with over.
I think
too,
all right, I'm going under. Bet. All right, I'm going
that's
under.
That's the safer bet.
All right, 2050. This $100. Okay, if it's before 2050, all right, I'll give each of you $100. If it's over 2050, if it's under, each of you give me $100. All right.
I'll give
if it's 2050, we don't do anything. All right.
I'll like one of your videos on TikTok.
If we win before 2050, I'll probably have spent all my money at the bar celebrating anyway. So you're not going to have it anyway.
All right.
Maybe you'll afford to buy some shirts, Noblet, if you win this bet.
So I think we've covered a lot. Obviously, youth development is a huge topic, and it's something we'll touch. We've already touched on it in other episodes. We'll touch on it again. I want to finish this off with saying something that, I've said this to teams that I've worked with, pretty much every single team I've worked with that was old enough to, understand what I'm saying. But I agree with Noblet that in an ideal world, we wouldn't have pay to play. In an ideal world, we'd have a lot of things. But, guess what? Life's not fair. Soccer isn't fair. And you have to deal with that, right? Like some people are born shorter. Some people are taller. Some people are, more athletic. Some people are less athletic. You do what you have, what you can with what you have, it's, obviously we can fight for, systemic changes. And I think that certain things should change in soccer, certain things should change in life, in the world, right? But at the end of the day, you're responsible for you. So you can try to help other people by changing the system, but you have to do your best within the system that you live in. And, if it's pay to play now, we've given you some ways to hopefully deal with that. And if you do them and things still don't work out, that's rough. But if you don't try to take initiative yourself and things don't work out for you, they're not going to work out for you if you don't take initiative yourself. And I do believe that if you work hard enough, things won't go to plan. Things won't work out exactly how you want them to. But if you do work hard, things will work out for you. You just need to stay the course and not get discouraged and put in the work. So, life's not fair, but you have to deal with that. I have to wake up and, realize that's the world we live in. It doesn't mean that you can't make it. Because anyone listening to this podcast, we all believe you can make it, whether that's in soccer, or life, or some other sport, whatever it is.
Or overthrowing capitalism to create a publicly funded free soccer.
This podcast brought to you by the Chinese Communist Party.
Okay, maybe not the Chinese Communist Party.
Instantly demonetized.
Brought to you by Karl Marx, resurrected.
It was actually Frederick Engels' birthday yesterday, so
Nice.
Happy birthday.
Happy birthday. All right. So that's us. We'll be back next week with another topic. Thanks for watching. Support the podcast. We're on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and YouTube. 8th episode, going strong. That's about it from me. You can sub to my Patreon to get access to the podcast a couple days early. Peace.
Peace.